Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's virtual program, Governance Game Changers, Building Boards That Lead with Kelly O'Connor. I am Brittany Spillman, and I have the privilege of serving as the Director of the Carey Center Community and Collegiate Programs. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors who make programs like this possible. Our presenting sponsor for today is the Walker Area Community Foundation, a nonprofit grant-making organization that works every day to build permanent capital, resources, spark meaningful conversations, inspire action, and empower partners to make a difference. We are also grateful for our community and collegiate program sponsors, Auburn University Outreach, the Kim and Tim Hudson Endowed Fund for Excellence, Auburn University Outreach Office of Public Service, the Drummond Thorne Stooks Endowed Fund for Excellence, and a community service grant made possible by State Representative Joe Lovern. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Kelly O'Connor is the Director of Development at Progress Inc. and has spent more than 20 years serving the Nashville philanthropic community in various roles. In her 11 years at Progress, Kelly has successfully managed the capital expansion campaign, initiated and designed the Access to Arts program, and increased donors by 174%. Previously, Kelly worked in development and community relations at the Faith Family Medical Center in Monroe Harding. She is the past executive director of the Williamson County Child Advocacy Center. Kelly received her bachelor's degree in social sciences from Washington State University and a master's degree from the Institute for Conflict Management at Lipscomb University. She is a certified fundraising executive and has earned a civil mediation training certificate. Kelly also works as a consultant and facilitator in the areas of strategic planning, conflict resolution, philanthropy, leadership, nonprofit management, and fundraising, and has lectured extensively on those topics. Please join me in welcoming Kelly O'Connor.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Welcome, everybody. Today we're going to get into governance game changers, how to build boards that truly lead. My focus today is on practical strategies, strengthening governance, elevating board performance, and most importantly, ensuring we recruit and empower board members with the social capital needed for strategic impact. Here's our roadmap for the next 45 minutes. We'll begin with the basics, explore why governance matters, review board duties and roles, then dive into board composition with an emphasis on social capital. So why does board governance matter? Board governance is important because the board ensures accountability to donors, clients, other stakeholders, and to the public. Nonprofit organizations are for the public good, so they need to have public confidence. One of the ways that nonprofits do this is by having a board of directors. This is the group who leads the organization and represents the public interest. Boards must be seen to be trustworthy, honest, and open. The three main purposes of a board, forget everything else you hear and you're told, but there are three purposes to a board. One is to provide organizational direction, that strategic thinking, strategic planning. The second is to provide oversight, specifically if you have an executive director, CEO. You have to hire, fire, support that executive director and provide that kind of oversight. Third, and perhaps the most important, is to, at least to many of us in the nonprofit world, is to ensure necessary resources. Now, the generally accepted duties of a board member for most nonprofit organizations are the following: commitment to mission. Look, if they're not committed to your mission, they have absolutely no business serving on your board. That, commitment to the mission should come first. Obviously, they need to understand their legal responsibilities, create and review bylaws and policies. Fourth is provide executive support and oversight, one of the purposes of a board, conducting governance and oversight, and supporting the organization financially. And you see how these duties align with the three purposes of a board. Many years ago, Town and Country magazine had a special issue dedicated to philanthropy, and they had an entire section that I kept for many years because it was fantastic. But it was entitled "For Serving on a Board." It had the questions that you should ask when somebody asks you to serve on a board. Really great information. But that section was entitled "Give, Get, or Get Off." And that pretty much sums things up. If you're not giving, if you as a board member, and honestly, I say this about staff, particularly executive leadership, if you are not personally making a gift to the organization, why should anybody else? It's really that simple. Board members additionally should be getting money, help open doors for development staff, for executive director, for your development team. Um, and if they're not doing that, get off the board. And it sounds harsh, but after all, that is one of the three purposes of a board, is to ensure the necessary resources. And for most of us, the necessary resources most commonly are financial in nature. Now, like commitment, sorry, the three duties in Tennessee, and every state differs a little bit in wording. I would say, I think most of you are probably in Alabama, so check Alabama state law, check with the Secretary of State's office. But most states tend to be pretty similar in nature. And in Tennessee, we have three duties under state law for serving on a board. One is the duty of good faith. Act in good faith and be fair. Be upfront and honest in your board obligations. The second one is duty of loyalty. Act with undivided loyalty in the best interest of the organization. You can't seek to benefit from the organization, and you must declare any potential conflict of interest and act within the law to resolve this conflict. And normally, all that means is just recusing yourself from board discussion and decision. Often, you just step out of the room for a few minutes while they have that discussion. It's not a big deal. And I would recommend, if you think there's even a potential for appearance of conflict interest, and I say this when I have our board members sign a board contract at the beginning of the year, if you think there's any potential, even appearance or whiff of conflict of interest, bring it up at a board meeting, and all that means is you might have to step out of the room for a few minutes. It's not a big deal. The third is duty of care. Board members must act reasonably as a prudent person in similar circumstances would, and be familiar with the organization's activities and financial condition, and obviously participate regularly in board meetings. Boards need to make sure that the organization is maintaining legal compliance with all applicable laws. All of this illustrates why having a strong board governance matters. It provides credibility to the organization. Frequently, board members, as well as some staff and executive leadership, get a little confused as to what their specific role is. Now, for nonprofit boards, and we've talked a little bit about this, governance and oversight. The board members need to ensure the organization fulfills its mission and complies with laws. Strategic direction, approve the vision, mission, and long-term goals. Obviously, financial stewardship, approve the budget, monitor financial health, and safeguard assets. Set policy, establish organizational policies and ethical standards. Executive oversight, hire, evaluate, and if necessary, replace executive director or CEO. Fundraising and advocacy, support resource development and represent the organization publicly. And accountability, ensure transparency and accountability to stakeholders. Now, on the other side of things, you have the nonprofit staff roles. Operations and management, the staff handles the day-to-day activities and implements board-approved strategies. The staff delivers programs and services. They design and execute all of the programs and services. The day-to-day financial management is typically done by staff. The staff manages the budget, payroll, and reporting under board oversight. Typically, most well-run boards at the board meeting, there's the organization CFO or bookkeeper, depending on the size of the organization, reports to the board what the financial status is. So the board has oversight, but the management of day-to-day operations and financial management falls to the staff. HR, recruit, train, and supervise employees and volunteers. Fundraising execution. The staff carries out campaigns, grant writing, and donor relations. Reporting, provide reports, updates, and data to the board so that they can make informed decisions. So the key difference between the board and staff roles, board equals governance and strategy. They are the big picture people. The staff is day-to-day operations, management and execution of everything. Now, when Brittany asked me to speak on this topic, I struggled with it. I've been on great boards and terrible boards. I've worked with every kind of board under the sun, it seems like. Quite a few with founder syndrome. That tends to be a thing. And over the years, I've seen and been able to build some very strong boards. I never really analyzed what makes a board strong, what makes a potential board member a good board member. And I started after, it's getting closer and closer to when I need to speak to you. And I'm thinking, what really is the difference? What makes a strong board as opposed to an okay board, but not anything great? And it comes back to leadership, but how do you define leadership? What makes a board member a strong leader? And it really came down to one thing. It was high social capital. Now, I don't know how it is in Alabama, but in Tennessee, I have never heard the term passion used so much in my life until I got in the nonprofit world. Everybody is talking about passion. Everybody's passionate about this and passionate about that. And often you'll hear nonprofit leaders talking about how they want board members with passion. Well, I'm not going to deny that passion is important, but in recruiting potential board members, I would much rather have a board full of people with high social capital. If your organization has a strong mission, it's doing good work, and it's pretty well managed, the passion will come. I mean, your mission should be strong enough that that passion will come as they meet who you're serving, they see the difference you're making. That passion will come. If you're getting somebody with a lot of passion but with low social capital onto your board, they can't develop high social capital quickly enough as a board member to really make a difference to your organization. So I'll take high social capital anytime. Social capital is one of the most powerful yet underutilized assets in nonprofit governance. And it's far more than just who someone knows. It's the trust, influence, and credibility that flow through those relationships. Leaders have social capital. And this kind of goes back to when I was looking at seeing what is the key ingredient, what makes a leader leading, what makes them a strong leader. And it kept coming back to social influence, social capital. I don't have any data to back this up, but when I look around, people I know who have the greatest social capital are also the strongest leaders. For me, there's an absolute direct correlation to this. Now, there are three forms of social capital: bonding, which is strong ties, community, demographic affinity groups. Your church, that's typically it can be a very strong bonding social capital. Bridging. These are people who connect across sectors, industries, and demographics. In linking, which is access to power brokers, funders, and policymakers. Why is social capital a board's superpower? Well, boards often focus on the technical skills, and that's really important. But if you need an attorney or a CPA on your board, there are plenty of them to go around. Find one with high social capital. Yeah, I'm not saying get rid of the technical skills. Get those technical skills, but find somebody that has the technical skills that also has high social capital. High performing boards intentionally recruit for relational power. McCallum and O'Connell in 2009 reviewed 5 major leadership studies and found that while human capital skills dominate training, social capital skills like networking, relationship building, and storytelling are increasingly recognized as critical for effective leadership. However, they remain underemphasized in many development programs. In another study, 156 leaders and 485 employees in Chinese companies were surveyed, and they found that leader popularity, which is the key dimension of social capital, directly boosts leadership effectiveness, with team cohesion serving as a mediator and leader openness strengthening this effect. A 2016 study, which studied 90 Chinese management teams, concluded that transformational leadership fosters innovation, and this connection is mediated by both internal and external social capital within leadership teams. Now, a recent survey of 310 academic leaders in Indian higher education reported that social capital through trust, professional networks, and collaboration significantly enhances leadership effectiveness, with institutional reputation partially mediating this relationship. The importance of social capital is clearly universal. In 2021, a study of a major US nonprofit found that higher quality social capital among board members significantly enhances governance effectiveness, highlighting board leadership as a vital factor. And I have all of these sources in my resources at the end of my slide deck, for any of you who want to look at some of these studies. But the point is, members with deep networks can open doors to donors, partnerships, media, thought leaders, and key stakeholders. This accelerates fundraising, advocacy, and most importantly, opportunity. Organizations with well-networked boards move faster and respond with more agility. Social capital equips leaders with broader influence and legitimacy. Trusted networks serve as pathways for team cohesion, institutional reputation, innovation, and effective governance. Effective leadership intentionally cultivates social capital through networking, openness, and collaboration across sectors. Now, I think it's kind of obvious how having high social capital can help you fundraise. But what's really interesting too is oftentimes you might not have a board member who something comes up. My organization works with people with intellectual disabilities, and technology, enabling technology is the new shiny object, and it's going to be amazing to help people do things for themselves that they hadn't been able to before. We might not, we actually do, but we might not have had anybody with the technical skills and the technical expertise. But if you have board members with high social capital, they'll be talking to their friends and say, oh, by the way, I had this board meeting and technology came up with regards to people with intellectual disabilities. You're a tech guy. Tell me about this. And even if your board doesn't have the technical skills or the intellectual skills I shouldn't say intellectual skills, subject matter expertise would be a better way to phrase that. if they have the social capital, that normally still brings in others who do have that subject matter expertise. Now, what are high social capital signals? Leaders with strong social capital can mobilize resources, influence stakeholders, and foster collaboration, as we've seen. It enhances legitimacy and access to diverse perspectives. Research shows transformational leadership fosters organizational innovation through internal and external social capital because leaders leverage networks to bring in new ideas and resources. Well, obviously, this is critical for many reasons, including complex social challenges. Transformational leaders drive mission aligned innovation, helping organizations adapt and thrive. Studies show social capital improves team cohesion, organizational reputation, excuse me, and resilience. It's a critical, intangible asset for nonprofits that rely on partnerships and community trust. Now, these are some of the indicators that you're looking for when evaluating potential candidates for your board. Do they have trust in their communities? Are they connected across diverse networks? Can they convene people? Can they mobilize resources or can they influence opinion? A board member with a strong social capital changes the organization's reach overnight. And again, this isn't just how many people you know. Um, and yesterday, as a matter of fact, I was at a board meeting, a board that I serve on, and somebody was talking about we need to talk to this particular individual. She knows everybody. I had, and they were talking about it in a specific context of she knows a lot of the people in the room where it happens. I happen to have a little bit more knowledge of this. And yes, she had been in the quote room where it happened. She did know those people, but she had a terrible reputation and leaves a wide wake in her path. You need to know that just because they happen to serve on this board and you know that somebody else served on this board, don't make assumptions about the person's social capital. Ask around. A lot of times people's reputation can kind of precede them. And many times you have, and this tends to happen a lot with letterhead board members, you have people with a very widely recognized name. So it's like, oh, they must be good. We want to get this person. If you do a little digging and ask around, that person really might not be very well thought of. They might have the connections, but the connections aren't necessarily willing to open up their pocketbook or their own resources to help that person. So, ask around and, you certainly don't want to badmouth anybody or put people in the position of having to speak ill of somebody, but you do want the truth. You want to know how much social capital these people really have, rather than just having a bunch of numbers in their Rolodex that people won't return their phone calls. Um, Mapping social capital for your board. Now, some people are really visual and like to do actual maps, and that's fine. One of the most effective exercises is creating board networking map. Identify each member's connections, corporate, civic, political, philanthropic, and community-based, and look for gaps. Which networks does your mission require that you don't currently reach? And that this becomes your recruitment strategy. I'm not particularly, let's just say I am not artistically inclined. So even drawing circles on a paper doesn't really work for me because by the end of the exercise, I can't really read my writing. I would suggest, and what I do is I use an old-fashioned board matrix. And rather than just having your skills, add in these other categories. And I'm happy to share this with you too with the PowerPoint slides. is it's a really wide board matrix. I go down and have, Joe Smith, Mary Jones, Jamal Warner, and just keep on going down the list of your current board members, and then look at the gaps that you have. But in addition to one column being for technical skills, or professions, include corporations, what corporate connections they have, civic, political, philanthropic, and community based. I mean, you want to know where these people spend their time. Who do they know? Who do they connect with? And let me give you an example and I really delve into this deeply in the civic category. I want somebody on my board who serves in Rotary. If you're in a small town, you might only have one Rotary Club. For us bigger cities, you have a big Rotary Club. You might have a breakfast one, you have a lunch one, you have an evening one, and then you have the suburbs. I want people from at least one Rotary Club that has connections with others. I want somebody from the Junior League. I want somebody from Young Leaders, somebody from, in my case, Leadership Nashville, the Chamber, Economic Club. Look at your civic Kiwanis, Lions, look at your civic organizations. You don't necessarily need a member of the organization, but you want people with social capital with those organizations. It might be government. Our organization does a lot with, we receive state funding through the Department of Disabilities and Aging. So we need social capital in those government departments with other nonprofits. What are the organizations that your board members volunteer at besides your own organization? Where are they serving on boards? Look at those and really delve into it. And, I'm in Nashville. What about the music industry is a big deal here. Healthcare industry is a big deal here. Banking, technology, all of these are we need representation. If you can't have representation and you don't have a board large enough to have somebody from all of these different categories, you want somebody with social capital in that. So you might not necessarily have Vince Gill on your board, but you might have an attorney who works in the music industry. You might have a banker, for example, who does. So the whole idea is you want social capital across many, many different fields. And again, this is not checking boxes that Joe Smith is in Rotary or is in the music industry. You want somebody with credibility. You want somebody who can convene. You want somebody who can mobilize, and you want somebody who can influence others. Now, when interviewing board candidates, ask questions as, who do you naturally have access to? Where do you hold influence or credibility? This is my favorite right here. Which networks could you help us reach? Tell people we're not just recruiting volunteers, we're strategically selecting ambassadors. Be really clear and candid up front as to what you are looking for with a board member. It's also critical, and a lot of people don't talk too much about this, but it's critical to find out what a potential board member is looking for through their service on your board. Now, a lot of times, and this is the South, so people will say, oh, I just want to help and I just want to make a difference. And I'm not saying that that's not true. Of course, it's true. We all want to make a difference. We all want to do good in the world. But what do they really need? There are a lot of organizations out there, and there are a lot of great organizations out there. Why are they interested in spending their very limited time with you and your organization? Are they interested in expanding their connections in your realm? Are they looking to, sometimes people are relatively new to town. Um, it can, sometimes people In our case, for example, we have people who have family members who've had disabilities. You know, find out what's really going on behind. I just have a heart for service. I'm sure they do, but again, that's not really helping you because a heart for service can work anyway, can do volunteer work anywhere. Find out, maybe it's your culture, maybe it's the people, maybe they are looking to build their resume. Find out, because there's nothing wrong with a letterhead board member if you know that going into it and they know what you need from them and are willing to do it, and you know what they need from you and you do it. The long and short of it is, if you understand what they're looking for and what's motivating this person before they join your board, it will help identify if this person will be a good fit. And the reality is, you won't have a good fit and you won't have a good, strong leadership team and board members if they're not a good fit. So find out ahead of time. And I can be kind of annoying saying, I know you want to help people. I know you have a heart for service, but tell me about that. Tell me about that. Why us? You know, really delve deep into that. It really helps weed out people who might not be a good candidate. It also helps for those of you, particularly in social services. When Brittany read my bio, you heard that I had been the executive director of a child advocacy center. There are certain areas that you might see some red flags working with children who've been sexually abused, and you might have a potential board member who's really interested in helping abused children because they were abused. If they're serving on your board in strictly that capacity, they could be a huge asset. If they want to be if they want to be a frontline volunteer, that could be a red flag. Not because they would be doing anything inappropriate, but because it's more about them and their needs rather than about the kids you're serving. So, delve into it deeply. It's a mutual. It's kind of like a dating process. It has to be a good fit on both sides. I feel like I'm off in my. I see. Strong governance requires diversity of thought. Oh, integrating social. Sorry, I am off on my slides here. Um, Integrating social capital into recruitment. Obviously, recruit for both expertise and relational power. Use criteria such as reach, influence, credibility, and diversity of networks. We talked about these interview questions. They're critical. Delve deeply. Here we go. Board composition and DEI. Strong governance requires diversity of thought, background, lived experience, and relational reach. DEI can, especially in these days, can be a controversial topic. It really shouldn't be, because when most of us, especially in the nonprofit sector, are talking about DEI, we're really talking about the diversity in its most diverse terms. We're talking about, yes, we're talking about gender. Yes, we're talking about race, religion, all of that. But we're also talking about diversity of skills, diversity of occupations, diversity of geography. For example, if you live in a metro area, you might need the people who live in the rural areas too, because you serve maybe state or you serve a region. You need diversity of thought. From a practical standpoint, the greater the diversity, and when I say diversity, I mean it in every possible way. you're helping yourself down the road. You're doing yourself a huge favor because you're eliminating countless unforeseen circumstances. If you have everybody, and there was a very popular example of the 1960s. I think it was with regard to Vietnam, and it was the Kennedy administration, and pretty much everybody, they were all young, white, Ivy League educated guys who went to a lot of the same schools, and they were the best and the brightest. But they overlooked how Vietnam could turn into what it actually did because they all had basically the same life experience. They were all looking through the situation under with the same lenses. The more diversity you have in the room and at the board table, you have different perspectives looking at things, and you'll have those people who are agents of reality. And this goes far beyond race, far beyond gender. It's it can be anything saying, what about this? Have you guys thought about this? What about this? Sometimes they're what people used to call the buzzkills in the room, but those are the people that help prevent bad things from happening because they foresee those unforeseen circumstances. So DEI is really important for your organization to help eliminate as many. They're kind of like your crystal ball. They can't necessarily see into the future, but they sure can help prevent a lot of bad things from happening down the road. DEI strengthens decision making and ensures representation. A national study of 1,456 nonprofit CEOs found that board diversity, race, gender, age, as well as other things, is positively linked to better governance practices, including strategic oversight, fundraising, and community engagement. Boards with diversity policies and inclusive behaviors amplify these benefits. Now, Indiana University's Lilly Family School of Philanthropy report shows that boards with higher racial, gender, and age diversity have greater member engagement, stronger fundraising participation, and more advocacy activity. A 2023 study found that board chair diversity significantly influences organizational performance, bridging internal board effectiveness and external mission outcomes. Bottom line is that the more diversity you have on the board, the greater your reach is going to be because it's less likely that networks will overlap, which amplifies your organizational outreach. In Nashville, our wealthiest area is Belmead. If you have everybody who can write a big check and everybody lives in Belmead, guess what? They all know the same people. You are not increasing your reach. Get as diverse of a board as you can in every possible way. Utilize term limits, staggered terms, and skills and social capital matrix to drive intentional composition. Board culture and accountability. The reality is even the best board members can't thrive without the right culture. That's why it's so critical to ask a lot of questions before you get these people to join the board. Psychological safety enables honest dialogue and strategic challenge. A board chair CEO partnership must be strong, clear, and healthy. That should go without saying, but so often it doesn't. Annual board assessments help ensure accountability. I prefer and I recommend a self-assessment. I give a board self-assessment out at the beginning of the year to show them what it looks like, to give them the heads up. Hey, this is the first board meeting of the year. You guys are going to be assessing yourselves down the road. I'm going to ask for this. You don't have to give it back, but I'm going to, at a board meeting in about 6 months, and I try to do it 6 months in a year, every 6 months, because after a year, you've just wasted a year if your board is not accountable to themselves and they're really not doing what they need to. It also kind of acts as an agent of reality to that individual as they're looking down the list and checking, did I do this? How good was I at this? It helps them either shape up and improve their performance, or they might realize, maybe this, I think you guys are great, but maybe this isn't the place for me, or I just don't have time. I'm overcommitted. And this is a, very, very dignified way to do this without having to have an awkward conversation about, you signed a board contract at the beginning of the year saying you do this and you haven't. So I would suggest this. It's not done to shame. There's no shame involved because they're doing it. Nobody sees it other than the individual board member, but it does help remind people of their of what we as an organization expect of them and holds them accountable. Okay, first off, I hate the term generative, and I was looking at other words to use, but proactive just doesn't quite cover it as much. So we are going to go with the word generative, although it sounds very AI-ish. But high-performing boards don't just react, they interpret. Generative governance is about meaning making, anticipating change, and exploring big questions. Shift meeting agendas so operational updates don't take over the entire board meeting. Reserve real space for strategy, foresight, and discussion. Talk about, hey, what's coming ahead? This is what's going on in the government. How might this impact us? Fundraising is not about asking. As all of you who are fundraisers know, it's all about connecting and relationships. Board members with high social capital can open doors that staff might not ever reach. There's a huge difference. And again, you experienced fundraisers will know this. It's a big difference between a peer-to-peer ask and somebody who works for the organization making an ask. It's just a different level. Even if you as a staff member have a personal relationship with that person, it's not as effective coming from a board member who is also a volunteer, because the long and short of it is, I might be asking my aunt for a large donation, but I'm still getting paid to ask her, even though it is my Aunt Karen. So, there is that little dynamic, even though you might have a very close personal relationship as a staff member, it's really almost always more effective to get a board member and to get that peer-to-peer ask made. Set clear expectations. And I've said this earlier, and I can't stress it enough. Every board member contributes financially and uses their influence for mission. If you don't have a board contract, I highly suggest using one. Spell those expectations out. Say what is required, what is expected, and what is the difference between being a good board member and being a great board member. Again, give, get, or get off. Or to put it more nicely, give, advocate, and connect. Now, to recap, we talked about strong governance. It's critical to an organization because it is credibility, direction, and mission depend upon it. 2, the superpower to strong board leadership is recruiting a diverse mix of people with high social capital. 3, be intentional in your board recruitment. Where the gaps are in your organization's reach, look for those and recruit to fill in those holes. 4, manage expectations. ask questions up front. That helps eliminate a lot of problems later down the road. I'm a conflict manager. I am a certified mediator. If you set the expectations up front, you avoid a lot of conflict later. Open communication is critical to that. Number 5, provide a culture that fosters open dialogue and time for strategy and foresight at board meetings. And 6, use self-evaluations to aid in board accountability. These are resources and citations. These are the studies, and then I have additional resources and Brittany will send you this PowerPoint tomorrow. I am open for questions now.
Kelly, I had a question submitted.
Of course.
It says, how do we encourage the board to adopt term limits? How do you deal with a board that you feel needs to be improved but tends to bring on family members? But some advice for a general long-standing nonprofit that can help consider these changes.
That is a great question. The easiest way, especially if you have a little bit of funding to do this, is get a consultant in to tell them because and this sounds like a cop out and I don't mean it. I'll give you some strategies if that's not a possibility, but many times an outside consultant can tell a board what they need to do because it is a best practice, and this is what the common practice is among really high functioning organizations and high functioning boards. If you as a CEO or director of development tell your board, they think that it's because they think it's personal. They assume a lot of reasons that it might not be. Oftentimes they'll listen to an outsider before they listen to you, even though they might have the highest respect for you. So I would get in an outside consultant, talk to the consultant about that up front, but I would use that perhaps for use the excuse for strategic planning or something, because you should be doing a strategic plan every 3 years or so. You might bring in somebody for a board orientation. Whatever you think you can sell to your board, that's how I would do. That would be my preference. Because I've been that consultant, I've been that ED telling my board, and I had a similar situation. I had the DA was my board chair. His wife was on my board. An assistant DA was on the board, and his fiance and an assistant DA's fiance was on the board. We serve 4 counties, but yet as an organization, but yet board representation only accounted for 1 town in one of those counties. I tried to tell them, talk to them, didn't work, brought in a consultant. They listened to the consultant. So, yes, that's one thing I would absolutely recommend. The other thing is maybe if you have a good board chair and you have a strong relationship with the board chair, or the board chair would be ideal. If the board chair is the problem, maybe talk to another board member that might be willing to listen, and maybe they can bring it up that way. There are a lot of ways to do it, but it's tricky. It's tricky and it needs to be finessed. I hope that answered that question.
I think so. And everyone, we have a nonprofit consultant directory. I just dropped the link to our website there where you can find a lot of these strategic planning consultants, board trainers, that kind of thing. So be sure to check that out. There was another question in the chat that says, any advice for the issue many boards are facing now regarding people who just don't want to spend their time on boards? We find people willing to help with a project, but it's getting harder and harder to get people to commit the time for board membership.
That's interesting. I haven't actually come across that. So this is the first time I have learned that that's an issue. I would kind of pull the board and see, is it, and this is my own ignorance asking this, is it a problem on your particular board, or is it across, is it a widespread issue in your area? I will say that one of the easiest ways that people say no is, let's say, I just don't have the time. That's a nice way of saying I'm not interested, or for whatever reason. If you think it might be your particular board, look. Oh, you're seeing it through. I just saw that. You're seeing it throughout the community. Um, talk. I would look at seeing what are the reasons? Is it because they don't want to sit in a room for, in Nashville, we have terrible traffic. Traffic is a big issue. So driving across town to a meeting that you're almost always going to be late for because of traffic is an issue. We have all of our board meetings are accessible through Teams. So if you can't make it, we typically will do two board meetings a year in person. The rest are through Teams. That eliminates a lot of time. If you have long board meetings, I just rolled off a board, and I've been working with them and trying to tell them that this is not a best practice, but they really love meeting. They love sitting in that room for 3.5 hours. We had one board meeting that was 4 hours. A board meeting should never be 4 hours unless the world is exploding and you're ready to close your doors. So, look and see what some of the logistics, and see if that's one of the problems. Is it a money issue that times are tight right now, and becoming increasingly so? Is it that individual board gift that's the problem? Is it the time that it takes to sit in a board meeting? Is that they'd really rather do direct service? I would really kind of do a survey, and find out, why don't these people want to serve on board, and then look to see what you can do to change what some of those obstacles are, and talk about what your board culture is. And board, maybe you're meeting every month. That 4-hour board meeting group met every month. That's a big chunk of time on a monthly basis. um, you know say, our meetings are limited to no longer than an hour, and we meet every other month. That actually is the case for my board. At Progress, we have one exception to that, and that's the June board meeting where they're voting on budget, and that the budget discussion might take a little bit longer. We have a $14.5 million budget, so it can, that can, you need to wade through the weeds a little bit. But normally we could go a little bit over an hour, but not much. So I would find out why that's such an issue. But that Thank you for asking that question. That's the first time I've heard of this.
Raylene, knowing that community, I also wonder if it's because the same people sit on almost every board. So maybe having somebody else that's different from that also works in that company, but it is not that same person that serves on every board. So board adjacent, maybe, is a good way to say it. Cindy had a question that says, is it common to have nonprofit board members to be required to give or raise a specific amount of money every year?
Um, that's a really, really good question, and that jumps around. Um, there are a lot of organizations, I think, are the YMCA used to basically, it was $1,000 gift a year if you wanted a seat on the board. Um, Symphony, the arts organizations might ask for more, might be a little bit more specific. Also, those are a little more of a prestige thing to sit on. The higher the prestige of the board, the dollar amount tends to go up. Social services, for the most part, tend to be a lower cost if they require a dollar amount. I personally don't think that's a good idea because a lot of people, especially if you have a strong diversity on your board, and look at age diversity, you might have, and Brittany, when you were talking about um, looking at somebody in the same company coming onto the board instead of somebody who is tired of serving on boards, get somebody younger, get a young up and comer that is really excited, ready to delve in, and again has that social capital, not necessarily in the same circles that you're thinking of, but in their own circles. Because look, a lot of our donors are older. We need those younger people. We need the generation Y and Z and A coming up. So look at those folks, and many of them are still paying off student loans. Many of them have young families. I really don't like asking for an amount. When my board members ask me how much are they expected to give, I will say that it should be within your top three. It should be a gift that's meaningful to you. Um, what is meaningful to one board member might be $10,000. To another board member, it might be $100 a year. Um, it needs to be meaningful to that person. It needs to be in their top three gifts, and that includes gifts to church and to whatever schools they went to. Um, so I hope that answers your question. I think by requiring a certain amount, you're automatically decreasing your diversity because you're cutting out a lot of younger people. More underrepresented communities might not have the same opportunity and the same ability to give. Some of your older folks on a fixed income, depending on who's on your board, what kind of organization you represent. So I would say that it needs to be significant to them.
And Cindy, I will add, we are seeing increasingly on grant applications what percentage of your board donates to your nonprofit. And they really want to see 100% because if your board's not 100%, it makes them question. So just keep that in mind. Roel asked, do you subscribe to the thought that boards are either working boards or capital raising boards?
I don't even know that it's a thought. To be honest, it's just a reality. And a lot of that goes back to the age of your organization. I have been on working boards, and those are typically cases of young startup organizations, newer organizations. My board is more of a fundraising board. Um, but governance also, our organization's over 50 years old. I will also say that arts organization, every category is a little different. A hospital board is very different. An education is very different than, say, a social services organization or an arts organization. So I think, yes, I absolutely do believe in that just because I think it's a reality. Smaller nonprofits are more, they might not have the luxury of having an executive director, so the board is having to do all of the work. So yeah, that's just the reality. The trick is that middle section when you do have an executive director and you're starting to get staff, trying to grandfather get those older board members who are used to governing to stop governing and let staff do it. That's where a lot of the growing pains come in, and that gets tricky.
Is it okay to ask a board to head a campaign for a specific program, or did I hear you say campaign is more on a day-to-day side?
You definitely need your board members involved in that. Um, when I was doing when we did our capital campaign, I absolutely asked board members to go with me to meetings. Um, you want them to because again, peer to peer is a lot more effective than a staff member asking them. Um, but the staff is going to do the actual um, writing the copy for the mailing pieces, if they're, for any of the brochures, they're doing the boots on the ground kind of stuff. You may ask the board member to set up a meeting, say, hey, Joe Smith at such and such a corporation. We really would like to see if they would be willing to to provide us with our lead gift. You golf with this guy all the time. Can you set up the meeting? And you might even say, I'll make the ask. But the fact is that person is still sitting in the room. And while the ask might be made from you, and I don't want to be confusing on peer-to-peer asking. You as a staff member, and this happened to me, I actually made the ask, but my board chair was sitting there, said, Joe, that's nothing for a man of your great wealth. Get your checkbook out. I can't say that, as a staff person. Now, I might say that to Aunt Karen, but I typically you as a staff member are not going to say that. That's where the board member comes in, and it's really important to have board participation at that level. You want your board to get you into that room, or get those potential donors into the room with you.
Angela asked, how many meetings did you say was acceptable to miss for a board meeting? Generally, we meet quarterly, but during major transitions, we meet more frequently.
If you only meet quarterly, I would say they shouldn't miss more than one, because at two, they're only there for 50% of the time. And that's where virtual meetings help considerably. You don't have to be there in person. If you're still there participating, you don't have to have an in-person meeting just to have it. So I would suggest having somebody call into the meeting if they can't be there. But if they're missing more than, I would say they need to be there 75% of the time. And I have asked board members to step off if they can't. And again, no shame, and say, you are so busy. We really appreciate all that you do for us, but I'm wondering if you're not just too busy to serve on our board right now. We would love to have you back, but I think this might be too much for you right now. What are your thoughts on this? And it might be a case of, oh, I was traveling for work a lot, but that was just temporary. We're getting out of that period now. I'll be there. Or it might be, yeah, you're right. I just had a baby, and I'm my first child, and I'm overwhelmed.
Well, Kelly, thank you so much for that inspiring program. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Keep an eye out for an email from me tomorrow. It'll have a link to the presentation and recording, a quick 3-question survey, and an opportunity to sign up as a Carey Center nonprofit affiliate if you are not already one. Our nonprofit affiliate now serves more than 450 nonprofits across Alabama and beyond, and it is a great way to access educational programs, professional development, and networking opportunities, and membership is completely free. We are also excited to share information about the Carey Center Nonprofit Professional Certificate. This is an online, non-degreed certificate developed in partnership with the Auburn University Office of Professional and Continuing Education and Merit Nonprofit Professional Development. Thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you at one of our monthly virtual programs or in person when our nonprofit training series comes to your part of the state. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.